Hello viewers, Tim Poole here for the latest episode of the Huddle. I'm with Thomas Donson, the head of trading at DataBet. Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Hi Tim, thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to speaking about a couple of different topics with you. But let's start, of course, with the World Cup. I think anyone in sportsbook can't fail to mention it this year. So kind of some of the words there. But first of all, how was the World Cup for you as a fan, as a trader overall?
Really enjoyed it. It was nice to have it back. Obviously, these are great spectacles for everybody. They only come around once every 4 years, and despite the best efforts with UEFA Championships and now the Club World Cup taking another sort of slot up, it's good to get it back in its regular position. Obviously the last time I had it in Qatar, and I think that threw a lot of people last time having it in December. But now having it in its normal position, we really enjoyed it. Really nice tournament all the way through. Nice to see it expanded. More games, a lot more to celebrate. Took a bit longer for us to get through all the games, but I think everyone thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think originally there was some pushback to the kind of expanded tournament, but I think when it comes to sports books, really no one in the business is going to complain about more matches, more to trade, and the potential for more kind of offers and revenue. In terms of DataBet and your team and the World Cup, how's the team evolved over the kind of past year, which I guess led into which is a big time for the company.
Yeah, so for us at DataBet, we've spent a long time preparing for events like the World Cup. The World Cup takes on a special focus where we have to put a lot of time into the automation side of the business on the technology, and blending that together with using our traders' skills and expertise. But we also utilize a lot of AI models. We've added extra data sources to help us cover more markets, more live data, more pre-event markets available for everybody. So it's really helped us try and optimize the product overall. And that's something which we've been trying to achieve, not just for the World Cup, but in many products over the course of the last year. I think for us, we've had a significant growth this year. We've had over 25% growth in turnover, 50% growth in profit, and we're now reaching over 600 sportsbooks. So it's taken a lot of energy and a lot of effort. We've remained very data focused and data driven. We've listened to a lot of clients coming through the door and had to be efficient in how we improve the offering that we can give for these sorts of events, these premier events that are coming around once every 4 years.
And you've touched on it already, but tell us a bit more about the specific, say, classic traditional sports betting offering, because DataBet obviously is synonymous with esports, but huge efforts have been made in, which sounds weird to say, but what you'd call classical sports.
Yeah, it's hard to term it. I think we call it classical sportsbook because, again, it's the traditional sportsbook that everyone knows and loves. And you're right, esports is something which DataBet formed going back nearly 10 years now. And, we've done esports as our core offering, and that's what became synonymous for in the industry. However, the last year we branched out. We started doing more classical sports, traditional sportsbook, for not just our own customers, which we have actually done for some time for our own internal sort of partners and early brands that worked with us. But we've now gone to market with a much better, wider offering. And that planning started some time ago. And we had to essentially make sure that we had everything prepared with engineering new sports, the new models coming through, making sure that everyone was ready to go with a quality product that can stack up against the best in the industry. And as you know, it's a very competitive industry. So there's been a lot of work going off behind the scenes. And a year ago, we launched that into the market. And we've then focused on events like the World Cup now, working with our product team, sales, marketing. Everyone has to be aligned from the word go to make sure that we're ready for these events. And we've been slowly improving, put out improved bet builders, player props, early payouts, and similar features just to engage with our current client base.
Potentially a couple of juicy questions coming up, because you mentioned a few kind of key elements and the things like early payout and bet builder, or bet builder especially, but early payout, I think more and more, and things like super sub, more and more, you're not going to find a sportsbook kind of without those core offerings. but how profitable was this tournament for operators? Because we had an upset with Spain and Cape Verde, but overall, was it healthy? You know?
Yeah, for us, it was incredibly good. I think it's, the similar sort of message across the industry. Everyone was extremely happy with the tournaments. Obviously, it's expanded tournaments, so we had 48 teams, 104 games, record numbers for sportsbooks is great news. More games to trade, more potential to earn revenue. That said, I think it has been a little bit harder for us to make some of the profits because most of our client base has been European or Asian based. And the times made that a little bit more difficult, particularly on in-play games. So the earlier games definitely performed a lot better for us than the later games. But yeah, overall, we still posted record numbers. The World Cup was our most profitable football tournament of the year. Highest turnover by game, second highest margin for a football tournament this year overall, and the biggest average stake per tournament as well. So as a fact, we actually took the same amount of bets in the World Cup over those 5-6 weeks as we did to the whole Champions League campaign, as a good comparison there. And our operators, because we work both B2C and B2B, they also had a relatively good World Cup. I think, we chose not to try and go over the top with bonusing. We advised a lot of our operators that, bonusing the shortest odds was probably not the way to go, and just believe in the quality of the product. And therefore we managed to get, margins that were record margins for the company, double-digit margins across the board, and extremely good results, for everybody.
Yeah, some really interesting trends. That Champions League comparison is very direct and paints the picture. And I guess a lot of the pre-tournament conversations that the industry were having, it sounds like a lot of it came to life and things went, I guess exceeded expectations even. When it comes to better behavior and kind of trends, were there any notable changes? Because obviously bet builders increased. What were the players, or should we say, trying to do this tournament? Whether they did it successfully or not is another question.
Yeah, we were much more pre-event focused, I think, this time because of where our client base was. I think that definitely made a difference for a lot of major bookmakers as well. 67% of our bets were pre-match, for example. But also, I think there was some big hype around the games. Social media, as always, these days, was taking much more influence on the information that customers have. So a lot of people going heavy on, Haaland and Mbappe, the goal machines of the tournament, the Messi factor, were, the press feeding into this. Was Argentina, for example, given easier games? I think a lot of that fed into people's perception of what was value in the market, and also what was, the way to bet. And I think when it gets to these types of games, the top tier games, it's really hard to find a balanced market as well. From a trading perspective, price has a little bit less of an impact on regular betting behavior than it would do in a normal game. A little bit, the price is very rock solid on most games. You don't see as much movement, but you'll just see a lot of one-way betting depending on your client base. So it gets a little bit harder for us to trade than a normal game. But that said, I just think, again, the enthusiasm behind the whole tournament, even if you're having a tough day at the office, we push the core products, we push a lot more derivative markets. And certainly, I think that for us, like you said, the early games, they were the big drivers of the day. And we were lucky with some of those as well. We, like you mentioned, the Spain Cape Verde game, even the Germany-Ecuador game, everyone was expecting goal fests and everyone was going on certain markets. It was much more profitable for us because there were obviously some good results in there. But yeah, compared to other major sporter events, I think this is the one tournament where you will gain, new customers who never had a bet before, people who were coming in from all different walks of life. Maybe they do know about football, maybe they don't know about football, but you've got the patriotic vote coming in or the patriotic bet coming in, and just a lot more. They feel informed just because of that social factor as well.
Yeah, it all makes a lot of sense, and some of the trends. I'm just thinking back to my World Cup as a consumer. Some of the trends you mentioned certainly bear fruit. I think the Spain game, I was expecting goals, and I may have had lost a couple of bets on that. But Haaland, Mbappe, and Messi, yeah, I had a bit more joy there myself. So it all makes sense. And you've mentioned kind of a couple of potential challenges there as well. But then you also mentioned the new customer that you're going to get in the World Cup that you may not get at other times. An age-old question, though. Maybe the final area we'll touch on the World Cup before we move on to a bit of esports. Now, what should operators do? But also, companies like DataBet, what do you do to retain those very customers who, they might have only really had the World Cup as an intention, but now they've signed up? What do you do next in terms of retention?
Retention is always difficult, and it makes me glad I don't work in marketing sometimes, I'll be honest. Yeah, for me, there's a bit of a shift away recently from the heavy bonuses and engagements, from just bonusing the heck to try and bring customers in. And I think engagement has become more key, using other strategies other than just constantly spoon feeding free bets and similar like programs. You'll only sort of acquire one customer, and when they disappear, the customer disappears as well. So we've tried to encourage more people to use our bet boosts, pre-built combos, personalization as well within the service that we offer to try and make markets appeal more directly to the customer that they have, and we can do that on an individualized basis. I think those kind of things, keeping people on site obviously is always important as well. So we try and feed people as many statistics and information as we can, try and feed them really informed. Again, anything we can do to keep them feel engaged on the product. And that way we're letting the product speak for itself. And I think particularly in the more mature markets, especially, whereby everyone is fully aware of who the competition are, they're fully aware of how many accounts they might have. And to be honest, they just want a good quality product rather than shopping around to make a few euros difference here or there. But the other aspect that I think really gets missed out on this is also having good quality risk management. And that's something that DataBet always have in-house here. And it does make a huge difference to the overall profitability of each customer. Let's face it, we're in this business to make a profit and to make money, and understanding which players you want to keep. And retention is a decision that you have to make, because not all players are players that you want to retain. There will be people who come along taking advantage of whatever offers you might be running, and then they're not as profitable to keep with you. So also about ensuring that you keep the right customers going through, and you make sure that you treat them in the right way with the right offers coming up if you want to go down the offers route, and also just incentivizing them, making them feel informed and enjoy the product. I think that's the key things going forward.
Yeah, again, makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of positive messages that we're getting when it comes to the World Cup. To switch from World Cup to esports, which so for me as a host, I'll admit I'm not the biggest esports kind of expert, but for DataBet as a company, obviously moving from World Cup to something like the IEM Cologne Major, which you can probably tell I've not said that too naturally. I've done a bit of research, but the point being, for DataBet, esports is kind of the bread and butter. Could you walk us through that tournament, which I believe was won by the Falcons? But again, I'm just my mouth is talking, but my brain isn't really interpreting like if we were talking about Spain and Argentina. But from a betting perspective, obviously that's a big tournament in the esports betting arena. What can you tell us about that, going from World Cup to Cologne?
Yeah. So for a company like DataBet, obviously we have a lot of suppliers, and we supply esports odds feeds to some of the biggest companies in the industry. So for us, we can take almost as much, if not more, sometimes on an event like the CS Majors than we can the World Cup. They're incredibly big tournaments for us. Very, very popular. Obviously, esports is a bit of a generic branding, I would say, because it's not just one sport. It's not like a football and tennis, how you differentiate them. Each title is very, very different. But the CS Major for us, we focus on it a lot. It is our most popular sport for Counter-Strike. And betting-wise, again, this year, it's been amazing for us. We've had record results on turnover, profit, active customers. So for us, it's been a bit difficult to trade, I would say. Kind of similar to the expectations of the World Cup in the football, where you think a lot of the favourites are winning. Well, this year for us, unfortunately, a lot of the favorites did win, is actually the highest percentage of favorites winning compared to recent years in these tournaments. So yeah, the Falcons came through. They've had a great tournament for us. Some great results again. Not easy to trade because of we have a lot of combination bets and we have a lot of people rolling these up with all the favorites, and naturally very profitable for our customers. But yeah, these come along a little bit more regular than the Football World Cup. They're pretty much annual, and there's some big tournaments every other few months. So for our perspective, these are like bigger wins for us, and just as important to us as the Football World Cup.
You mentioned each title is different, and I can't put my heart into this question because I play Call of Duty and I play it badly. I'm not, my friends can watch this and verify. I'm better at FIFA, for example, but I do love a bit of Call of Duty. When it comes to these titles, I know there is some betting on Call of Duty, especially the biggest tournaments, but CS2 is a lot more. Again, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot more popular for betting. Why is it so kind of adaptable when it comes to bets?
It's a strange one because viewership numbers and betting numbers don't exactly align. So, for example, I'll use League of Legends here, a MOBA game, which is probably one of the most viewed games in the industry on Twitch and all these other social platforms, particularly out in Asia. But when it actually comes to betting numbers, it's the complete opposite. It doesn't perform as much as, say, Dota 2. CS is one of those which, for me, it's been very, very popular, as popular maybe with the ecosystem that it has. People have grown up a massive audience, as they did with Call of Duty, Rainbow Six, competing titles throughout the last 15 odd years. So people have grown up playing that. But I think a lot of people just have always pushed because it's been a bigger game online for many years. There's a big ecosystem of competitions around it. So if you think of the Football League in the UK, for example, where you've got different tiers, different divisions, you've got that similar sort of setup kind of happening for CS, where you've got your top tier, best players in the world playing on a regular basis. And then you go down a few tiers, but it means there's always something happening, almost 24/7. You have games going off year round. And that really keeps people engaged. The other thing that really goes with CS is the social side. Esports as a whole, it's what I have, I call it Ronaldo factor, where people will follow the player rather than the team. And, transfers happen in esports just as they do in regular sports. And people will follow players from team to team and follow them around because of the way they play, the social aspect. And that also creates a lot of not leadership, but it creates a lot of people coming on and just following one person, no matter what they're doing, and they'll follow that team from there on in. Call of Duty, however, that's one which is a bit more US focused. And really, unfortunately, this is how the makeup of the producer really makes a big difference here. So Activision, who's behind Call of Duty, retains a bit more control over the tournaments. They do have tournaments, but they don't really open it up as much as we do see for Counter-Strike. And that makes all the difference in terms of funding and basically the money that goes into behind the scenes prize money, etc. And that's really what's made such a success of Counter-Strike.
Really interesting. I think that the player trend is interesting, and you're seeing a bit more of that certainly in American sports, maybe basketball, that kind of thing. But I think you're seeing it still seeing it in football, as you mentioned, the Ronaldo effect. I mean, okay, Messi's towards the end of his career, but let's say, Barcola might be on the move this summer. Whether he goes to Liverpool or Arsenal, suddenly that club's going to have a brand new kind of fan base. So look, really interesting, and especially I find that how the structure effects that you mentioned, the structure effects kind of the betting popularity is interesting too. In terms of trends and again better behavior on the esports side, apart from the favorites winning and maybe making it a bit more difficult for the sportsbook there, and maybe the player following that you just mentioned, what kind of trends have you maybe observed this season?
So, like I say, the esports trends, they are a little bit different to normal football, tennis, basketball trends. But what we see happening in those sports is something which has been happening in esports for a while. So we definitely have focused more on the player props. It's been more player prop driven than almost team driven. with a lot of our markets, and that's where we've seen an increase more and more. Teams and players spend a lot on their social aspect of the game, and we see that sort of come through in actual betting terms now, which is not something that you would expect as much for regular sports. Definitely, that's boosted the profitability and revenue generation of those markets. But we've also had a 90% increase in revenue year on year, just in 1 year to the other on the same tournament. So I think for us, we're seeing a big rise in popularity. 50% increase in bets year on year, and some of that is because we've taken on new customers here at DataBet, as you'd expect, but also just the popularity as a whole. People are willing now to start placing bets and watch the live streams. They're getting more engaged, and these things are becoming more available, even in very immature markets. And I think that's a key thing that we look at. The streaming now takes part in Africa and places like this, where before it's not been as prevalent because of mobile data, etc. So now we are unlocking a new type of client, and a new area of client. And I think that's really helping the trends for not just the player markets, but esports as a whole.
Yeah, again, interesting. And I'm trying to imagine in a football market having player props above the 1x2. Just even though Bet Builder is increasing popularity, you wouldn't see it for maybe never see it. But yeah, that's quite interesting that as you say, the player props are such a big factor when it comes to esports. A final question, really. We can bring kind of classical sports back into it as well, but looking at esports and just looking at kind of the rest of the year, what kind of forecasts have you got for the wider industry, but also kind of DataBet H2 and going into 2027?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, I would say, to kind of predict, because obviously we expect to see some significant growth. Esports during the time of COVID obviously had this massive boom, and it hasn't continued in the same manner. But I believe now, the money that sits behind in terms of the tournaments, in terms of the marketing and advertising, we are just seeing more and more younger customers coming through now who are starting to, bet for the first time, and they're, engaging more and more with esports than they are classical sports. So for us, we still expect to see a lot of growth in most of our core titles. We've got some major tournaments ahead. Just in the coming months, we've got the Dota 2 International. We've got World Cup events even. Esports now has regular World Cup events, which is something relatively new, and they're growing. And, we've still got the CS World Cup, Rainbow Six, and many other titles. So even if you're not into maybe MOBA games, or you're not into necessarily like shooting games, there's other things out there that you might play just casually. And now there's becoming more events available for you to actually have a bet on. PUBG, those kind of sort of single player games as well, where mass brawl games, they're becoming much more attractive to people to sort of sit down and say, I like to play this. I think I enjoy it. I understand it, which was always the case. And I think the blocker for a lot of people traditionally, they never understood what was happening in esports. Whereas now, a lot more modern generation of bettors are understanding these sports, and they enjoy them just as much, if not more so, than the classical stuff. So we'll continue to push the player markets, the bet builders, the personalization. This is something which is core to the offering at DataBet, and something that we do probably better than anyone else in the market for esports. But we also want to just keep pushing ties with our bookmakers. We want to work with them, with our clients on the B2B side, to make sure that they're as informed as they can be about the good events and opportunities coming up, what's going to drive engagement. And again, another aspect of what we do is going out, like I mentioned before, into immature markets. We are a premium odds provider, so we would just want to push out into the market, LATAM, Africa, and other areas whereby we see a good appetite for the product that we have. And that's really important to see that growth coming later on this year, and particularly 27, 2028 as well.
Yeah, from what you've outlined, you can clearly see some kind of opening of barriers, globally, but also when it comes to the sports themselves. Obviously, it's going to keep you busy. Hopefully some growth for you guys, of course. But best of luck for busy season. But also, we've got the Premier League and club football coming back in the classical sports. So, all the best for that. And thanks very much for your time. Been a really interesting chat.
Thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.